Welcome to Heart Over Gold, the channel where love, kindness, and humanity shine brighter than any fortune. In today's story, on a rainy night in the city, fate brings together two strangers from different worlds. Ethan, a hardworking mechanic with calloused hands and a weary heart, finds comfort in a quiet corner diner after long days at the garage. Serafina Sterling, a powerful CEO desperate to escape the weight of her own success, steps into that same diner seeking a moment of peace. When a forgotten wallet and a simple act of kindness cross their paths, neither realizes how deeply that moment will change their lives. What begins as a small gesture soon unfolds into a story of truth, connection, and the fragile line between two worlds, the humble and the extraordinary. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments, and keep up with our latest stories. Outside, the city was cloaked in a silver haze, the rain tracing endless streaks down the diner's windows and tapping a quiet, rhythmic song against the glass. Inside, the world felt softer, warmer, filled with the scent of coffee brewing, bacon sizzling, and the faint sweetness of maple syrup. The low hum of a saxophone drifted from a speaker in the corner, blending seamlessly with the quiet murmur of conversation. At a corner booth sat Ethan, hands wrapped around a chipped mug, the faint stains of engine grease still etched into his skin. His denim jacket hung damp and heavy over the seat beside him, and the weight in his shoulders told of another long day at the auto shop. That familiar ache didn't bother him much anymore. It was just part of the life he knew. The diner had always been his refuge, a place where no one asked questions, where the night moved slow and calm. But tonight, something about the air felt different. Across the room, near the rain-blurred window, a woman sat alone, Serafina. Her arms were drawn close around her, eyes fixed on the storm outside as though she could disappear into it. Gone was the poise she usually wore like armor, the immaculate perfection that came with her name. Dressed simply in jeans, sneakers, and a gray hoodie, she looked smaller, human in a way that few ever saw. She hadn't planned to be there. It had been an impulsive escape from another endless day of meetings, decisions, and expectations that pressed down like invisible chains. She wanted, just for a moment, to be nobody, to eat without the weight of her own importance. Before her sat a half-finished bowl of tomato soup and toast, simple, comforting, the most ordinary meal she'd had in years, and for a fleeting moment she'd almost felt free. Then, reaching into her bag, the illusion shattered. Her fingers brushed through the lining once, twice, and then panic bloomed. Her wallet was gone. Her chest tightened as she checked again, her breath catching. Just then the waiter approached, young, polite, but with a hint of impatience in his tone. "Everything all right, ma'am?" Serafina's heart raced. She gave a small, nervous laugh. I think I left my wallet somewhere. I'm so sorry. I can come back first thing in the morning." The waiter sighed quietly, already shaking his head. "I'm afraid that's against policy. Payments required before leaving." Her cheeks burned. The room suddenly felt smaller. She could feel the glances, the quiet judgment of strangers. "Please, I'm sorry," the waiter cut in, voice firm but polite. At his booth, Ethan looked up from his mug. He'd barely noticed her before, but now he saw the tremble in her hands, the way her voice faltered. She wasn't trying to make excuses. She was genuinely mortified. Before he even realized what he was doing, Ethan stood. "Hey," he called gently, his voice cutting through the uneasy silence. Serafina's head turned toward him, eyes wide. Ethan offered a reassuring nod, the kind that said everything would be fine, then turned to the waiter. "I've got it," he said simply, pulling a few worn bills from his wallet. Probably all he had left. Serafina's lips parted in surprise. "No, please, you don't have to." He raised a hand lightly. "It's just soup," he said, calm and kind. "Everybody has rough days." The waiter, relieved to have the problem solved, nodded and walked away. Serafina sat frozen for a moment, unable to process what had just happened. No one had ever stepped in for her like that, not without a reason, not without wanting something in return. In her world, generosity always came with a price. When she finally found her voice, it came out soft, almost disbelieving. "You really didn't have to do that. I would have figured something out." Ethan smiled faintly, a tired warmth in his eyes. "I know, but sometimes it's okay to let someone else help. Trust me, I've been there." The silence that followed wasn't awkward, just full. There was something unspoken in it, something neither quite understood. Serafina wanted to explain herself, to tell him who she really was, but the truth felt too heavy, too fragile. Instead, she reached for a napkin, scribbled a few words, and folded it neatly. "Thank you," she said softly, sliding it across the table. Then she rose and left, the bell over the door chiming gently behind her. Ethan watched her go, her figure fading into the rain, before unfolding the napkin. In neat handwriting it read, "I owe you. Please let me make this right." Serafina beneath it, a phone number. Ethan smiled to himself, curiosity flickering in his tired eyes. He didn't know her story or the world she came from, and neither of them knew that this small moment, this single act of kindness, had just altered the course of their lives forever. The storm eventually broke, leaving behind a crisp autumn chill that swept through the city. Serafina stood once again outside the diner's glowing windows, the folded napkin in her pocket worn from being held too often. The aroma of fresh coffee and pastries pulled her inside like an old memory. For days she'd thought about him, about that simple kindness, that moment of unexpected warmth. It wasn't about the money, it was about humanity, about someone seeing her as a person, not a name. Ethan was there, sitting in his usual booth, a paperback open but forgotten. He was thinking of her too, the mysterious woman from that rainy night who had somehow lingered in his mind far longer than he expected. The soft chime of the diner's door pulled him from his thoughts. He looked up and then froze. It was her. "Hi," she said, nervous but smiling. "Do you mind if I join you?" For a second, Ethan just stared. Then his expression softened into a smile. "Yeah, of course, please." She slipped into the seat across from him and placed a plain white envelope on the table. It looked oddly formal in the casual diner light. "I wanted to come back and thank you properly," she began, voice steady but gentle, her eyes meeting his. "You didn't have to help me that night, but you did, and I'm truly grateful. You didn't have to pay for my meal the other night, but you did, and I appreciate that more than you know." Ethan gave a modest shrug, a hint of residual fatigue in his movements. "It wasn't a big deal, really. You just looked like you were having a rough night. We all have them." Serafina gently pushed the envelope across the table. "I owe you this. Please let me pay you back." Ethan hesitated, then took the envelope, his fingers brushing against hers for a fleeting second. He glanced inside, his brow furrowing slightly. The crisp bills were far more than the cost of a bowl of soup. He looked up, a question in his eyes. This is too much, Serafina." She offered a soft smile, a genuine warmth finally reaching her eyes. "Call it considerate interest, or maybe just my way of saying thank you properly. Please take it for a moment." Silence settled between them. Not awkward this time, but comfortable, filled with mutual curiosity. So Serafina ventured, breaking the silence. "Do you come here often?" Ethan chuckled, relaxing back into the booth. "Yeah, it's kind of my spot after work. Helps me unwind." He gestured vaguely with his mug. "What about you? What do you do?" "Me?" Serafina chose her words carefully, navigating the dangerous line between truth and concealment. I work in business consulting," she said, keeping her tone light, deliberately vague. "It's not as hands-on as what you do, I imagine. But it helps people in different ways, I suppose." Ethan nodded thoughtfully, though a flicker of curiosity quickly crossed his face. "That sounds complicated." Their conversation flowed easier after that, discovering shared quiet interests, contrasting daily realities. They talked about books, Ethan's love for classic literature, Serafina's confession that she hadn't had time to read for pleasure in years. He shared stories from the garage, funny customer mishaps, the quiet satisfaction of fixing something broken. She laughed genuinely and freely, a sound rarely heard outside her carefully controlled world. Ethan was captivated by her quiet grace, the thoughtful way she listened, truly seeing him, not the grease-stained mechanic. He spoke of his dreams, not of vast wealth, but of purpose, of owning his own small garage someday, a place built on trust and honest work. There was a simple sincerity in his ambition that resonated deeply with Serafina, a stark contrast to the relentless pursuit of power she witnessed daily. And Serafina, she was drawn to his authenticity, his lack of pretense, the easy kindness he extended without expecting anything in return. Their brief encounter had blossomed into something unexpected, something real. Days turned into weeks, and their meetings became a quiet ritual. The diner after work, coffee, stories, laughter. Ethan found himself looking forward to these moments. a bright spot in his demanding routine. Serafina felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in years, a precious escape into a world where her name and her fortune held no weight. But as their connection deepened, so did Serafina's guilt. A silent, gnawing companion. She wasn't actively lying, but the omission felt like a betrayal. One evening, as they lingered over half-empty coffee mugs, Ethan's words, spoken casually, landed like a stone in her stomach. "You know," he said thoughtfully, stirring his drink, a distant look in his eyes, "I met a lot of people who seem to think money fixes everything, like it washes away your problems, your past. But it doesn't. I've seen too many guys in fancy suits who forget what real work is, what real problems look like." Serafina's stomach twisted. He didn't know the half of it. His words stung, not because they were wrong, but because she belonged to that world, the one he spoke of with such quiet resentment. He saw the facade, the perceived ease of wealth without understanding the different kind of burdens it carried. Later that night, alone in her expansive penthouse, staring out at the glittering city lights that were her domain, Serafina felt utterly torn. Would he still look at her the same way if he knew? Would the kindness in his eyes turn to suspicion or worse, contempt? Would he still see the woman from the diner, the one who appreciated a simple act of grace, or just Serafina Sterling, the billionaire CEO, a symbol of everything he seemed to dislike? She wasn't sure she wanted to find out. Not yet. The fear of losing the only genuine connection she'd found in years kept her silent. The diner was quieter than usual that following evening, the rain tapping a soothing rhythm against the windows. Ethan sat at his usual booth, the worn paperback open, but his gaze fixed on the door. Their meetings had become the highlight of his week. Simple conversations over coffee and pie, moments that felt so genuine, so real. But tonight, Serafina was late. He checked his phone again. No message, no missed calls. A small knot of worry began to form, just as the familiar pang of disappointment set in, and he considered calling it a night. He saw her outside the window on the rain-slicked sidewalk. Serafina was standing, her posture refined even in the casual coat. She was speaking softly to someone, a sharply dressed older man holding an umbrella standing beside a sleek black town car. Not just a nice car, the kind of luxury vehicle that belonged on magazine covers, not parked in the humble lot of this diner. Ethan watched, a sudden, cold ripple of unease tracing its way down his spine. The driver opened the car door with an air of practiced deference. Serafina offered the man a polite, almost formal nod, then slipped inside the car. The door closed with a quiet thud, and the vehicle pulled away smoothly, disappearing into the city night as if it had never been there. Something felt profoundly wrong. He tried to shake it off. Maybe it was a friend. Maybe she'd called an expensive cab service, but the image of that car, the man in the suit, her subtle formality, gnawed at him. Back at his small, quiet apartment that night, the question haunted him. Who was Serafina really, against his better judgment? Driven by a curiosity that felt almost like a betrayal of the simple connection they shared, he opened his old laptop. He hesitated, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. Don't be stupid, Ethan, but he had to know. He typed her name into the search bar. Serafina, he vaguely remembered writing it down. Sterling. Serafina. Sterling. The results loaded instantly, and what he saw stole the air from his lungs, twisting his gut into a painful knot. CEO of Sterling Holdings, net worth staggering, philanthropist, business mogul. Article after article, glowing profiles from Forbes, Bloomberg, Vanity Fair, photos from glittering galas, charity events, looking every inch the powerful, untouchable heiress. The woman he'd been sharing coffee and dreams with, the one who seemed so genuine, so normal, wasn't just in business consulting. She owned a global empire. She was the very definition of the world he quietly resented, the world he thought she was far removed from, and she had never told him the truth. The glowing screen felt like a physical blow. Serafina Sterling, billionaire. The name, the face, the staggering numbers, they swam before Ethan's eyes, shattering the simple, genuine image he had built of Serafina Hayes. Lying. Not technically, she'd said business consulting. But the omission felt like a betrayal, a deliberate withholding of a truth so monumental it made their connection feel like a cruel joke. Every shared laugh, every quiet confidence, every moment he'd felt truly seen by her. Did any of it mean anything? Or was he just another fascinating anomaly? A brief slumming excursion for a woman who lived a life he couldn't even imagine? He didn't call her. Not the next day or the day after that. The thought of talking to her, of hearing her voice, knowing the magnitude of what she hadn't shared, felt impossible. He buried himself in work at the garage, the familiar grime and roar of engines a welcome distraction from the turmoil in his gut. But the image of her face juxtaposed with the polished perfection of the magazine photos haunted him. Serafina, meanwhile, felt a growing knot of anxiety tighten in her chest. Ethan wasn't answering her calls or texts. His usual easy presence at Thediner was absent. Had she said something wrong, done something to push him away? The silence stretched heavy and unnerving. She sensed something was terribly wrong, but the specific reason remained a terrifying mystery. It wasn't until the fourth evening, the rain once again whispering against the diner windows, that Ethan finally appeared. Serafina was sitting alone at their usual booth, her untouched coffee growing cold, the simple comfort of the place feeling hollow without him. When the bell above the door chimed, her head snapped up, a wave of desperate relief washing over her until she saw his face. He looked utterly different. The warmth was gone, replaced by a coldness, a guarded pain that sent a chill down her spine. His eyes, usually so kind, were hard, distant. "Ethan," she breathed, standing up, her chair scraping against the floor. "Oh, thank God, I've been trying to." He cut her off, his voice low, tight with a simmering emotion that wasn't quite anger, but something deeper, more wounded. "So you're not struggling at all, are you?" Serafina blinked, her heart sinking, his words, his tone. He knew something. "What?" He didn't answer verbally. Instead, he dropped a folded magazine onto the table between them. It fell with a soft slap, opening to a glossy feature spread. Her face, looking impossibly glamorous, stared up from the page. The headline blared, "Serafina Sterling, the billionaire philanthropist." Serafina paled, every drop of color draining from her face. The magazine, the headline, the photos. The carefully guarded secret was out. "Ethan," she whispered, reaching a trembling hand towards him. "Please, let me explain." He pulled back sharply as if her touch would burn him. His jaw was clenched tight, eyes filled with a hurt that mirrored her own, but also something she didn't recognize. Resentment, betrayal. "Explain what, Zedalit, that you pretended to be someone you're not? Was this whole whatever this was just a game to you?" Tears welled instantly in her eyes, blurring his pained face. No, I never lied to you, Ethan. I couldn't." "You told me you worked in business consulting," he interrupted, his voice rising raw with the feeling of being deceived. "You sat there night after night and let me tell you everything about my life, my struggles, my stupid dreams of a small garage while you own a global empire. Why, Serafina? Why hide something like that?" Her voice cracked. The carefully constructed walls she'd built over years crumbling in the face of his raw pain. "Because I wanted you to see me, not my money. Every man I've ever met, every person who's ever shown interest, it's always been about that. About the name Sterling, about the wealth, the connections. I didn't want you to see that version of me. I wanted you to see just Serafina, the person who sits in a diner and loves old books." Ethan shook his head, stepping back, creating distance that mirrored the chasm, suddenly separating their worlds. "So what? You thought I'd be like them? You thought I'd suddenly treat you differently? Try to use you for your money? Is that really what you think of me?" "No," she cried, tears streaming down her face now, hot and undeniable. "That's what I was scared you'd see. I was scared you'd see me the way everyone else does. I've spent my whole life being defined by my last name, by my bank account. I just wanted something real for once. And what we had, it felt real, didn't it, Ethan?" His eyes softened for a fraction of a second, a flicker of the man she knew, but the hurt was too raw, too deep. "I don't know anymore," he whispered, the words heavy with sorrow and confusion. Silence hung thick between them, suffocating. The weight of unspoken truths, of dashed hopes and shattered trust pressed down. Serafina reached for him again, her voice trembling, desperate. "Ethan, please, care about you so much. I didn't mean to hurt you like this." He stared at her, his fists clenched at his sides, a battle raging behind his eyes. The kindness she spoke of, the connection they'd shared, wearing with the pain of deception. "Maybe you didn't mean to," he said finally, his voice broken. "But you did." And with that, he turned, leaving the magazine on the table like a discarded piece of evidence. The bell above the door chimed, a mournful sound in the quiet diner, as he walked out into the night, disappearing just as she had done weeks ago. Serafina stood alone, the cold coffee, the glossy magazine, and the echoing silence her only companions. The rain had started again, tapping softly against the windows. But this time, it felt colder than ever, mirroring the ache that had just settled deep within her soul. The truth is out and their hearts are broken. Can Ethan and Serafina ever bridge the gap between their worlds and mend the shattered trust? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you're feeling the pain of this moment, give this video a like and subscribe to follow their journey to the end. The days bled into a quiet, aching void, each one heavier than the last for both Ethan and Serafina. Ethan hadn't returned to the diner since that night. The place that had once felt like a warm, simple refuge now seemed hollow, a painful monument to a connection he wasn't sure had ever truly existed. He buried himself in work at the garage. The familiar sense of oil and gasoline, the noisy demands of engines, a welcome shield against the silence in his head. He worked long hours pushing his body to exhaustion, trying to drown out the thoughts that gnawed at him. She lied. The accusation echoed harsh and cold. She's a billionaire. She could buy this whole street, this whole neighborhood 10 times over. And he was just a mechanic with dirt under his fingernails and a dream that felt impossibly small now. But beneath the hurt and the bruised pride, a different voice whispered softer, insistent. She laughed at your terrible jokes. She listened when you talked about your dream. She didn't look at you like you were just anything. He replayed their conversations, remembering the genuine curiosity in her eyes, the way her face softened when he talked about owning his own place. He remembered her vulnerability in the diner that first night, the way she had trembled, the raw honesty in her voice when she confessed her fear of being seen only for her money. Was it a lie or was it fear? His own insecurities, the deeply ingrained feeling that he wasn't enough for someone like that, poisoned his perspective. Maybe she didn't trust him. Maybe she hid it because she thought he would react exactly this way, blinded by the money, unable to see past the zeros in her bank account to the person she tried to show him. The thought twisted his gut, a painful mix of anger at her and shame at himself. He lay awake in his small, cramped apartment at night, the silence amplifying the ache of her absence. Meanwhile, in the breathtaking expanse of her penthouse, surrounded by a luxury that suddenly felt utterly meaningless, Serafina was equally lost. The glittering city skyline, a view she once commanded with detached pride, now felt like the bars of a gilded cage. The rain, still a frequent visitor, blurred against the floor-to-ceiling windows, mirroring the relentless ache in her chest. She checked her phone constantly, fingers hovering over his contact, hoping against hope for a message, a sign that he might reach out, that he hadn't completely closed the door. But there was nothing, and her own pride, her own fear of rejection held her back from making the first move. For years, Serafina had perfected the art of building walls. Growing up surrounded by wealth had taught her harsh lessons. People were often drawn to the name, the fortune, the power, rarely to the person beneath. The fleeting friendships in private schools, the relationships that withered when the financial pageantry paused, the calculating gaze of those who saw her as an opportunity. Walls were safe, trust meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant pain. But Ethan had somehow bypassed those walls. He had seen her, laughed with her, listened to her long before he knew the name that defined her world. He had shown her a simple, uncomplicated kindness that had cracked the foundation of her carefully constructed defenses. And in her fear of losing that rare, precious connection she had, ironically, sabotaged it herself. The pain of his reaction, the cold accusation in his eyes, was a brutal mirror reflecting her deepest fear. That no one would ever truly see her. But beneath the pain, the memory of the man who paid for her soup, who dreamed of an honest garage, who looked at her with such genuine kindness, that memory refused to fade. It was a stubborn spark in the darkness. Several days later, the suffocating silence, the relentless ache became unbearable. Serafina stared out at the indifferent city lights, a new resolve hardening within her. She couldn't just wait. She had to try. She had to show him the truth, the whole truth, without hiding behind omissions or fear. Show him how much their fragile connection meant to her, regardless of their worlds, regardless of the risk, even if it meant laying her heart completely bare and facing the possibility of final rejection. She had to try and bridge the gap she had helped create. Driven by a resolve that cut through her fear, Serafina made her way to the auto shop. It was located in a part of the city she rarely frequented, a world away from the gleaming towers of her daily life. The building was modest, functional, the scent of motor oil and gasoline heavy in the air even from the street. This wasn't a place of polished surfaces and hushed tones. It was a place of honest work, of grime and effort. It was Ethan's world. She stepped inside, the bell above the door giving a soft chime that announced her presence. The interior was dimly lit, tools scattered across worn workbenches, the overhead lights casting pools of warm, flickering light. Cars in various states of repair occupied the bays. It wasn't glamorous, but it felt authentic, solid, felt like him. She spotted him hunched over the engine of a beat-up sedan, his brow furrowed in concentration, grease smudging his hands and cheek. He looked utterly absorbed, a picture of focused dedication. Her heart ached at the sight, a sharp physical pain. This was the man who had shown her unsolicited kindness, who had listened to her with genuine interest, who had seen her when no one else bothered, and I let my fear poison it. Ethan noticed her before she could speak. He straightened slowly, wiping his hands on a rag. His body language instantly guarded. The concentration on his face was replaced by a familiar, painful coldness. "Serafina," he said quietly, his voice flat, strained, giving nothing away. She stepped closer, stopping a respectful distance away, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. The air between them crackled with unspoken tension, the weight of their last confrontation heavy in the silence. I didn't come to argue," she began softly, her voice trembling slightly despite her best efforts. "I came because I need you to know the truth. All of it, not just the headline version." Ethan crossed his arms over his chest, a defensive barrier. His eyes, though guarded, held a flicker of the deep hurt she had inflicted. "I think I've heard enough, Serafina. I saw the magazine. Heard you yourself say it was just a business consulting job." Serafina shook her head, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "No, you haven't heard it all. Not the why." She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded letter, the paper slightly crumpled from being clutched in her hand. She placed it gently on the workbench between them, a fragile bridge across the divide. This explains everything. Please, Ethan, just read it." Her voice was a raw plea, stripped bare of the poise and control she wore like armor in her public life. "And if you still want me out of your life after this, if you read it and decide I'm not worth the complication, I'll go. No questions, no expectations. I promise." For the first time since she'd walked in, Ethan saw a true, devastating vulnerability in her eyes. Not the polished CEO, not the woman from the headlines, but just Serafina, the woman he had shared coffee with, the woman he had thought he knew, the woman whose simple thank you had meant something real to him. He stared at the letter lying between them, then back at her face, searching for any sign of artifice. "I didn't hide who I was because I thought you weren't good enough, Ethan," she continued, her voice breaking slightly, the tears finally beginning to fall. "It was the opposite. I was scared. Scared that if you knew the truth, you'd see me the way everyone else does. Like some walking headline, some object defined by zeros. Not Apperson, not me." She looked away, blinking back more tears, a silent sob catching in her throat. "I wasn't trying to deceive you. I was trying to protect something rare, something you thought we had." Ethan felt his own throat tighten, the anger wearing with the resurgence of his earlier confusion and hurt. "And how was I supposed to trust you, Serafina? How was I supposed to believe anything when you were living this double life, when you let me pour my heart out, talking about barely making ends meet, about my dreams, while you had enough money to make those dreams happen 1,000 times over without blinking?" She nodded slowly, accepting the validity of his pain, the sting of his words. "I know, and I can't erase what it did, how my fear felt like deception. But I'm here now telling you, without the walls, without the image, a beat of heavy silence. I care about you, Ethan. I care about you so much," she whispered, the raw emotion hanging in the air. She hesitated one last time, her gaze searching his face, finding only a painful, unreadable conflict. "I'll leave you alone now," she said, her voice regaining a fragile steadiness. "But please read the letter, please." And with that, she turned and walked towards the door, the sound of her footsteps soft and receding, leaving Ethan standing alone in the quiet garage. The faint sound of the rain outside echoing the storm inside him. The letter lay on the workbench, a small white rectangle holding the weight of everything left unsaid. Everything broken. He didn't pick it up. Not yet. He just stared at it, his mind a chaotic mix of hurt, confusion, and the lingering echo of her vulnerable plea. The small folded letter lay on the workbench, a white rectangle stark against the oil-stained wood. Ethan stood alone in the quiet garage, the scent of grease and metal thick in the air. The only sound, the distant hum of the city and the echo of Serafina's trembling voice. His initial reaction was stubborn pride, a refusal to give in, to let her words sway him after the hurt she'd inflicted. She left again with a note like, "I'm just some problem that can be fixed with paper." But the image of her face, pale and tear-streaked, pleading with him, wouldn't leave his mind. The raw vulnerability in her eyes felt more real than any magazine cover. He argued with himself in the silence. She hid the truth. Ethan, a massive truth that's a lie no matter how you slice it. Yet another part of him, the part that remembered her laugh over coffee. The way she listened to his simple dreams countered. She was terrified. You saw it, and you reacted exactly the way she was afraid you would. Hours later, after he had locked up the garage, the city outside settling into its nighttime rhythm, Ethan finally sat down in his small, cramped apartment. The letter was still in his hand. With a deep, shaky breath, he unfolded it. Ethan, I never wanted to hurt you. I never meant to deceive you. When you paid for my meal that night, it wasn't just an act of kindness. It was the first time in a long time someone treated me like a person, not a name or a number. I've spent my whole life hiding behind my wealth, behind the name Sterling. Because most people only care about that. They rarely care who Serafina is. But you did. You saw me before you knew who I was. You listened. You laughed with me. You made me feel seen, truly seen for the first time in years. And I was so afraid that once you found out the truth, that genuine connection, that precious feeling would be instantly ruined. Afraid that you would see the billionaire and not the woman you shared a quiet moment with in a diner. My fear made me silent. And my silence looked like deception. I understand that now, and I am so sorry for the pain that caused you. I never cared about what you have or don't have, Ethan. I cared about your kindness, your strength, the way you look at life with hope, even when it's hard. I cared about your dream of the garage, not because I could easily fund it, but because it was yours, built on honest passion. I'm sorry I let my fear hurt you. I should have trusted you more, but I needed you to know the truth now because you deserve honesty. And I couldn't bear the thought of you believing I ever saw you as anything less than the incredible man you are. I don't know if we can fix this. I don't know if you can forgive me or if you even want to, but I'll keep hoping that maybe, just maybe, we can find our way back to what we had or build something new. With all my heart, Serafina. Ethan folded the letter carefully, his hands trembling slightly. He read it again and then a third time. The harsh voice of accusation in his head began to fade, replaced by a dawning, painful clarity. It wasn't about her money. It had never really been about the lie. Not entirely. It was about him. He had let his own insecurities, his own deeply ingrained fear of not being enough, of being judged by his working-class life against her unimaginable wealth, poison something real. He had been so quick to believe the worst. To assume her silence meant she thought he wasn't worthy of her truth, that he was just a temporary amusement. He had pushed her away, not because she was a billionaire, but because he had been too scared to believe that someone like Serafina Sterling could genuinely care about someone like him. And in doing so, he had validated her deepest fear. He had seen the headline first before seeing the person standing in front of him hurting, trying desperately to explain, I don't want to lose you. Ethan. Her whispered words from the diner, now echoed in the letter, resonated with a new powerful meaning. She hadn't wanted to lose him either. He stood up, a surge of adrenaline, of desperate resolve coursing through him. He couldn't let this end here, not with misunderstanding and regret. He had been wrong. He had let his pride and his fear steal something precious. She deserved more than silence. She deserved to be seen, truly seen by him. She had come to his world vulnerable and alone. Now it was his turn to go to hers. He glanced at the crumpled magazine still sitting on his kitchen counter. There was a photo of Serafina, radiant and poised, accepting an award at a glittering gala. The caption mentioned a major charity event happening tonight. It was a world away from grease and engines, a world he had only seen on screens. He didn't have a suit that fit right. His good shoes were scuffed, and he knew he would stick out like a sore thumb. But none of that mattered anymore. Armed with nothing but a borrowed tie and a heart finally free of pride, Ethan stood outside the opulent glass skyscraper. The building towered above him, a monument to the kind of wealth and power Serafina Sterling commanded, a world away from the grease and steel of his garage. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic, nervous rhythm. This was it. Inside, the gala was in full swing. The air sparkled with the light of chandeliers and the hushed murmur of elegant conversation. Guests in designer gowns and sharp suits mingled, sipping champagne amidst sleek, modern decor. A live orchestra played softly, a sophisticated backdrop to the high society tableau, and then he saw her. In the center of the room, radiant and effortlessly graceful, stood Serafina. She wore a stunning emerald gown, her hair a cascade of soft waves. She was talking to a group of influential-looking figures, her public smile in place. her posture perfect. Yet Ethan, who knew her quiet moments, there was a subtle guardedness in her eyes, a hint of weariness beneath the polished surface. She was there, but a part of her was missing. Ethan adjusted the slightly wrinkled tie, a stark contrast to the impeccable attire surrounding him, and stepped further into the room. The murmur of the crowd seemed to dip slightly as his worn dress shoes met the gleaming marble floor. He felt the weight of curious eyes, the silent assessment of an outsider. But he didn't care. His focus narrowed to a single point, her. She hadn't seen him yet. He took a steadying breath. The scent of expensive perfumes and lies sharp in his lungs and crossed the distance. Serafina. Her head turned, her eyes widening in shock the moment they landed on him. Ethan. Her voice was barely a whisper, instantly cutting through the ambient noise. The group she was speaking with fell silent, turning to stare. He stepped closer, ignoring the sudden hushed whispers, the blatant curiosity on the faces around them. Nothing else mattered. "I'm sorry for interrupting," he began, his voice clear and steady, filled with an emotion that silenced the room more effectively than any security guard. "But I need to say something to you." Serafina blinked, her lips parting, but no words came. She looked like she might shatter. Ethan took another breath, speaking loud enough for not just Serafina but everyone nearby to hear. He wasn't hiding anymore. "I was wrong, Serafina. So wrong." His voice trembled slightly, raw with honesty. "I let my own fears get in the way. My own pride. I told myself I wasn't good enough for you, that our worlds were too different, that you deserved someone who could give you more things." He met her gaze, the pain and confusion still there, but now overlaid with a resolute truth. "But the truth is, I don't care about your money. I never did. I care about you." He gestured softly towards her, encompassing the woman beneath the gown, beneath the title. "The person who sits with me over coffee and laughs at my terrible jokes. The one who showed me kindness when I had nothing to offer in return. The woman who taught me that love isn't about what you have, but who you are." A collective soft gasp rippled through the stunned crowd. Tears welled instantly in Serafina's eyes, blurring his earnest face. Ethan took another step closer, closing the final distance. "I was scared, Serafina. Terrified, actually. Scared that someone like you, someone so incredible, so far out of my league, could possibly care about someone like me. Scared that my simple life wasn't enough. But I don't want to live with that fear anymore. I don't want to lose you." His voice dropped to a fierce, raw whisper meant only for her. "I don't want to lose us." Silence for a single breathless heartbeat. The opulent room seemed to pause, every eye fixed on them, and then Serafina broke. A single tear escaped and traced a path down her cheek as she whispered back. Her voice choked with emotion. "You were never not enough, Ethan." The crowd seemed to melt away as she closed the remaining distance between them, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor. When she reached him, her hands trembling slightly rose to cup his face, her touch warm and real against his skin. "You never had to prove yourself," she whispered, her voice thick with unshed tears and overwhelming relief. "You already were everything I wanted." And with that she kissed him. It was a kiss soft and tender, born of pain and regret, fear and forgiveness, carrying the weight of every unspoken word, every lonely night, every shattered hope now being rebuilt. Applause erupted around them, hesitant at first, then swelling into a genuine heartfelt roar that filled the grand hall. But Ethan didn't hear it. All he felt was the warmth of her arms wrapping around him, the steady beat of her heart against his chest, the undeniable reality of her lips on his. And in that moment, nothing else mattered. Not the wealth, not the headlines, not the stark differences in their backgrounds. Just them. Two hearts choosing each other completely and irrevocably. The scent of fresh paint and motor oil filled the air, mingling with the cheerful sound of laughter and conversation. Sunlight streamed through the large garage doors, casting a warm glow across the freshly polished concrete floor of Whitmore Auto Repair. Today was the grand opening of Ethan's own garage, a dream he had nurtured for years, now finally undeniably real. Balloons swayed gently at the entrance, a handmade banner reading "Grand Opening" stretched proudly above the bay doors. Friends, neighbors, and local business owners gathered, their energy electric, filled with genuine support. Standing quietly near the entrance, a radiant smile on her face, was Serafina. She wore a simple sundress, her hair soft around her shoulders. She wasn't here as the CEO of Sterling Holdings, not as the billionaire philanthropist. She was here as Ethan's partner. Her eyes scanned the crowd, then settled on Ethan as he moved from person to person, shaking hands, sharing stories, his face alight with pride and gratitude. There was a lightness to him now, a quiet confidence that went deeper than words. He had found himself again, and that filled her with more pride than any business achievement ever could. After their emotional reconciliation at the gala, they had taken things slow, carefully rebuilding the trust that had been shattered. Serafina had supported his dream, not by writing a massive check or pulling strings, but by being there. She listened as he brainstormed ideas late into the night, offered encouragement when doubts crept in, celebrated small victories with genuine joy. She had been his anchor, his quiet strength. And Ethan, he had poured his heart and soul into this garage. From designing the logo to handpicking every tool, the space was a pure reflection of him. Honest, solid, built with his own hands. This wasn't just a business. It was proof that he could build something meaningful, something real on his own terms. A hush fell over the crowd as Ethan stepped onto a small makeshift platform, a large pair of ceremonial scissors in hand. He cleared his throat, visibly emotional as he scanned the faces looking up at him. "I'm not much of a public speaker," he began with a nervous chuckle, earning warm laughter and supportive cheers. "But I need to say something today because this moment, it means more to me than I can put into words." He glanced towards the gleaming garage behind him, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "This place, it's not just a business to me, is a symbol of everything I fought for. For the longest time, I didn't believe I could do this. I told myself I wasn't smart enough, not connected enough, that dreams like this were for other people." His eyes shifted, finding Serafina in the crowd, and held hers. "And then someone showed me I was wrong." Serafina's breath hitched, tears blurring her vision. "She didn't just help me dream," Ethan continued, his voice growing softer, filled with profound gratitude. "She reminded me that love isn't about what you have or where you come from, but who you are. She believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself, and I wouldn't be standing here today without her." A ripple of softs moved through the crowd, many eyes turning towards Serafina. Ethan's voice lowered further, gentle and heartfelt. "So to Serafina, thank you, not for the support or the encouragement, though I'm grateful for that too. Thank you for showing me that I was enough." All along, the crowd burst into heartfelt applause, the emotion raw and undeniable. Serafina wiped a tear from her eye, overwhelmed by his public declaration, by the simple, powerful truth of his words. And when Ethan looked at her, holding out his hand, she stepped forward without hesitation, bridging the small distance between them, his arm wrapped around her waist as he leaned down, pressing a tender, heartfelt kiss to her lips amidst the cheering crowd. For that brief moment, the world outside the circle of their embrace faded away. It was just them, two people who had navigated misunderstanding, insecurity, and fear, finally choosing each other completely authentically. When they pulled apart, their foreheads resting against each other, Serafina whispered, her voice thick with emotion, "You never had to prove yourself to me, Ethan. You were always enough." He smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that reached his eyes. "And so were you." The crowd had dispersed, the laughter and music fading into the soft hum of twilight insects. The garage lights were dimmed, but the open door slat in the soft hues of a sunset, painting the sky in golds and purples. Ethan and Serafina sat together on a wooden bench just outside the garage, their hands intertwined, the quiet comfort of their connection, a tangible presence between them. No words were needed. They had both found what they had been searching for: peace, love, and the freedom to be exactly who they were together. The sun dipped lower below the horizon, and Ethan turned toward her, his voice soft, filled with promise. "What's next for us, Serafina?" She smiled, resting her head against his shoulder, looking out at the fading light. Whatever we want, together and in that quiet moment beneath the painted sky. They knew this was only the beginning of their forever. And that's the story of Ethan and Serafina, a reminder that true love isn't measured by bank accounts, but by belief, vulnerability, and choosing to see the person beyond the world they inhabit. If this heartfelt story moved you, please give it a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and comment below your favorite moment. Don't forget to subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories for more unforgettable tales of love, resilience, and finding connection in unexpected places. Thank you for being part of our family. We'll see you next time for another story that touches the